In this video, I'm going to paint up the Ork flyer that I magnetized in the last video. If you haven't watched that video yet, I will leave a link on the upper right hand corner. I start by priming all my parts black. Because I magnetized this kit, I have to do everything separately, so I have to paint the plane itself and then all the little magnetized parts. Next, I airbrush on gunmetal silver with a mix of 50% gunmetal with 50% flow improver. Mix it up real good, and then I shoot it through my airbrush on stuff like the exhaust, the various nozzles in the back of the plane, and other items like the custom force field, the big shooter, and the super shooters. Airbrushing on the silver is a nice time saver, especially for larger areas. Next, I dust on a light white highlight on most of the model in areas that I did not paint silver. I apply this treatment, which is very similar to a zenithal highlight, onto basically every part. This allows me to lay down lighter colors and speed paints later on as part of the base coating process. One of the things that I also like to do is in individual panels, I will apply a little bit more highlight so I get a lot of the highlighting work already done before I lay the colors down. This cuts down a lot of time on the overall painting process. I will be painting my Ork flyer in the colors of the Evil Suns because, well, red ones go faster. This is Blood Red Army Painter Speed Paint, which works really well as a single coat solution right on top of the highlighting that I did earlier. Army Painter Speed Paints work really well out of an airbrush, and I do it straight up directly into the cup of my airbrush, and I spray it onto all the areas that need it. To add some variety to the model, I also airbrush Zealot Yellow Speed Paint onto some of the parts. This is more of an accent color, so I used it sparingly on only about 10 to 20% of the model. I use gunmetal metallics, and first thing I do is I just touch up anything that I had oversprayed, for instance some of these exhaust pipes. After that, I apply silver accents onto areas such as these spikes in the front of the nose, and then moving on to the fins of the missiles and the bombs, as well as other areas that did not get silver from the spray painting process. I also apply the silver onto random panels on the plane. I don't overdo it, just about 4 to 5 panels, just to make the plane look a little bit more ramshackle. I applied some blood red speed paint onto the center dorsal panel of the Dakkajet here. Next, I brush on some matte white onto areas that I oversprayed with my airbrush earlier. Next, I use Grim Black Speed Paint, which works really well in the cockpit area of the plane. It flows very easily into the hidden nooks and crevices and allows everything to look nice and dark. I also use this color on the super shooters for my Grot Gunner. Next, I use Ork Skin Speed Paint for, obviously, the exposed skin on the Ork and the Grot. I next switch to hardened leather speed paint, and this goes on most of the uniform of both the Grot as well as the Ork. I used weapon bronze on these areas of the Wazbom-Blastajet. I used matte black acrylic paint as an accent color for some of the missiles and bombs, and also the front of the nose of the plane. I also apply matte white as an accent color on some of the missiles. Next comes the detailing and decorating work. Now, any of this is optional. You do not have to do what I'm doing here, but I just decided to do some fun stuff, such as spiraling around the bomb right here. And most of this I just do freehand. I mean, orcs aren't the best artists in the world, so if you mess up a little bit on freehand orc art, it's just considered orc art. If you want to try your hand at something a little bit more challenging like checkers, what I recommend is use a slightly smaller detailing brush, and then starting at one edge, freehand some small squares equally spaced apart. Do this all the way around the first row, and then on the second row, try to connect the ends of two of those squares together and then complete another square staggered around it like this. And then just kind of keep on going, build row upon row. And then as you approach the tip of the missile here, you would add a little bit of slant to the sides of your rectangles, and it will look more like a triangle as you approach the tip. For the tip, you can paint it whatever color you want. I just chose white just to make it easy. I added the same checkered-like feature to the left wing of the plane. I made the checkers in black, and I did the same thing as I did on the missile, creating row by row of rectangles as I went. Now the wing can get a little bit tricky because there's a taper in the back and a taper in the front. And just do your best, have fun with it. Orcs are not ultramarines, they are not codex compliant or anything. If it's good enough, they're ready to go. I added a small amount of pure red acrylic paint onto some of the missile tips just to give them some variety. I used goblin green acrylic paint, and I applied this onto all the cables on the various parts, and I also used this color on some of the dials inside the cockpit. Next, I used white shield blue acrylic paint, which is nice and bright, on the goggles of both the orc and the grot, and I also used it on the various cables as well as the dials within the cockpit. I added some lava orange to the cables and dials to give it a little bit more variety. I added more interest to the tips of the wings and tails by adding some demonic yellow to them. For the canopies, what I did is I just whipped out some white primer, and I carefully traced with a medium to small detailing brush, taking my time to make sure I'm only on the raised surfaces. On top of the primer, I applied the same color as the rest of the plane, which is blood red Army Painter speed paint, and I carefully make sure that I do not paint onto the clear surfaces. However, since bead paint is pretty runny, all you have to do is just use a clean brush and it should come right off if you make a mistake. For washes, I picked strong tone, and I applied this onto any area that did not get speed painted, mainly all the silver areas, as well as anywhere that I needed a little bit more definition. Next, I added some simple weathering onto parts of the model by using a makeup brush, and I dry brushed some of the gunmetal onto just random areas of the plane. This will give the plane a slightly worn, battle damaged, and ramshackled look. I also made sure to do this with all the separate magnetized parts. Onward to one of my personal favorites for my Ork army, rust. And I use dry rust from Army Painter and dry brush it onto anything that's silver. The key to making rust look convincing is to be very random with your placement, as well as the density of paint that you use from area to area. For instance, some can be a little bit more orange, some could be very orange, and some of it could be just a light dusting of rust. At the same time, you could easily overdo rust, so what I recommend is try to keep any of the silver parts or anything that looks silver, make those look rusty. Everything else, just kind of smidge rust here and there sparingly so that the whole model doesn't just look like a huge brown mess. Ending with some finishing touches, I put some red in the eyes of the Ork and the Grot, and then I just kind of scan through the models, and if there's any features such as little graphics on the bombs or on the fuselage, I just add contrasting colors to them to make those features pop. For instance, on anything that's red, I use yellow as a highlight, and anything that's yellow, I use conversely red as a highlight. And I just kind of go through the whole model, just make sure I captured everything. For instance, painting whites on the teeth or any cables or wires I might have missed. You can go as detailed or as macro as you want, it's completely up to you. We're almost to the finish line. Next are decals. I picked the ones for the Evil Sons, and I just picked a few that I thought would look nice on the plane. And what I do is I use microset and an old brush. I pick the decal or decals that I want. I never work on more than 5 at once just in case the decals dry out. I apply some microset onto the area that I want to put it, and then I work the decal in place with a brush or my finger. For smaller decals, I usually transfer them with a brush and then I move it in place and let it settle. Decals, especially with Orks, is a really fun process because you can really put it wherever you want. Orks just do whatever suits their fancy, and as an artist and miniature painter, this gives you a lot of freedom to have really a lot of fun just experimenting, putting things where you think looks good, and at the end of the day, it may look terrific. So I applied a lot of these little markers all over the plane just to make it look like kind of a real plane. And then also on the side here, I put some kill markers, which I had a lot of fun doing. I put about 6 of them. But you can go crazy and put them all over the nose if you want, and that's the fun of it. Last few steps, varnishing. Now a word of caution about the canopies, do not spray varnish them. Use this matte varnish that you can get from Army Painter and just brush them onto the raised edges. For the rest of the plane, I recommend applying a gloss varnish followed by a matte varnish. This will give the plane a nice, slightly bright finish. Once all the varnish is dry, I attach the canopies onto the fuselage with Loctite glass glue. This glue is great because it will not fog up the glass. However, make sure to not put it on the clear surface or it will show. The last step is basing. I use 3 different materials, starting with these rocks here. I apply them with gel super glue onto random areas on the base. Since the base is pretty big, I did have to dress it up a little bit so it didn't look so bland. So I spruced up the base but without overdoing it. Now if you want the rocks to stay in place, apply some regular super glue in between the rocks, and this just helps bond it more permanently. Next, I apply Elmer's glue all over the base on areas that don't have rocks. I spread the Elmer's glue out evenly with an old brush. Then I pinch some of this taller tuft grass-like material and I place it in small little clumps on the base. I place it randomly just so it looks like taller grass. After that, I go ahead and spread the smaller flocking material on the rest of the base, and this creates a flatter surface all the way around and dresses everything up real nice. With this final step done, the Ork flyer is fully completed and everything is magnetized so you can run any of the 4 variants depending on the game you're playing. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would appreciate a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video. Happy hobbying!